The clincher came when we were shopping for Arctic gear to equip our troops who would be going up to the heights. And then we found to our horror that all the suppliers in London and Switzerland said there is not a single piece of Arctic gear available in the world because the Pakistanis have purchased 3,000 sets. Or rather 1986 is when General Parvez Musharraf, who was the commander of the SSG battalion of the SSG group out there, he took over and he occupied a series of very, very high posts. When the news of the loss in Siachen was coming about, Benazir Bhutto was telling them, this Pakistani army is only fit to fight its own country. She sent the chief a gift of bangles and a burqa. You see now when they got it, remember 8 jackets coming out there, such heavy casualties in the first month of arrival of a new location will shake anyone. Even the commanders up the line will say, okay, let's give the stars to somebody else. But the battalions, they said, we have lost 10 of our boys. We want revenge. Now, in 8 hours of movement, can you guess how much they had covered? Less than 400 yards.
Whoa.
And Bana Singh closed in towards that machine gun pit first, to try to silence that first. They closed in first, they cocked the weapons, and they discovered to their horror that the weapons have all frozen solid. And it is also the highest spot on earth where combat will ever be fought. And for your role in it, this post will from now on be called as Bana Post.
Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. I'm here to tell you a story today. A story about Siachen, the world's highest battlefield. Operation Meghdoot started on the day of Baisakhi in April 1984. It's the longest running operation of the Indian Army. I'm sure all of us have seen a lot of pictures, some videos, and probably even read or listened to some testimonial of someone who had served there. If you're from the armed forces, I'm sure you have even met someone who has served there. There is a story within the story which is of the Bana Top, the battle which began on the 23rd of June 1987. To talk about both these stories today, I have with me Colonel Ajay Singh, a soldier scholar who donned his uniform for about 28 years and after his army career has written 4 books. The 5th one, I'm sure, is on the line before the year's end. Written over 200 articles and an authority in himself with regards to military history. One thing that I must say, his books showcase the Indian military history through an Indian eyes, and that is something which is very, very important. He appears on television, has co-hosted a couple of TV shows, and today he's helping me out understand the military history of this great nation. Thank you, sir, for joining me today once again.
Thank you, Adi. A pleasure being with you like it always is. And I always look forward to coming on your shows.
Thank you so much, sir. The pleasure is actually a lot towards this side as well. So to begin, we are going to discuss the Bana Top battle, but I think it will be important for us to find out what is this whole Siachen conflict, as in what is the backdrop for the Siachen conflict? What are the claims that both the countries have? The Pakistanis keep saying one thing, we always say the other, but I want you to make us understand what is it actually on the ground.
I think you're right, like all good stories, we should start from the beginning. And Bana Top, I think most of our viewers already know it. It is a peak, the highest point on the Saltore Ridge line leading to Siachen. Which is where the entire Siachen conflict is being fought out there. But what on earth are Indian and Pakistani soldiers doing up there in any case? Why did the Siachen conflict begin? What are all the claims? I'll try to give you a kind of a background to that, so we build on to how the post came about and how they eventually captured. As you know, when the ceasefire line was drawn between India and Pakistan, it went all the way up to a point called NJ 9842. That's near the base of Siachen Glacier. And then it read, and thence north to the glacier. Now, Pakistan interpreted this line as meaning moving northeast towards the Karakoram. Right? That allowed it to link up with China as well. India took it as moving north along the watershed, which is the accepted principle in mountains. And this wasteland, almost the Siachen is almost 70 kilometers long, about 40 kilometers wide as such. This wasteland, nobody bothered about. It was so remote, it was so barren, there was no presence, nothing like that. But then towards the late 70s, Pakistan began sending expeditions into the glacier. Mountaineering expeditions. They started sending Pakistani officers, LOs with Japanese, German, European expeditions going out there. They started issuing permits in their name. Now they also started issuing maps which showed Siachen as part of their territory. But they were very slowly and surreptitiously laying claim to that glacier. And they could have got away with it. They could have easily taken it quietly in the same manner in which they took all the northern areas in 1947-48, had it not been for the fact that they were discovered by none other than Colonel Narendra Bul Kumar, the famous mountaineer. He was the commandant of the High Altitude Warfare School, a seasoned mountaineer himself, and in an expedition into the mountain expedition into the glacier, he started seeing more and more traces of Pakistani presence. Now, on one of the expeditions, he was also zapped by a Pakistani helicopter which followed him. And he met a Japanese friend who showed him the permits issued by the Pakistani army to go mountaineering up there. And he saw the maps which showed it as part of Pakistan. Now, he came back and he revealed his finding to the then 15 Corps GOC, General Hood, under whose area the whole thing fell under. General Hood, the army commander at that time of Northern Army, was General Chibbar. Both of them instantly realized the implications behind it. And they realized that the Pakistanis were up to something to occupy the glacier. And that is when the wheels were set into motion for us, the Indian Army, to occupy the glacier first and preempt the Pakistanis from occupying it. That was the background to the event. And that's what started the race to Siachen.
One can only expect sneaky business from Pakistan, so who else? And of course, now they're big brother on the other side.
Of course, which is worse.
Absolutely. I mean, I won't be surprised if they one fine day come up with a map saying Siachen is also part of China. It'll be another thing. So what
if Pakistan becomes part of China in the next 20 odd years or so, then I'm sure they'll extend the claim to Siachen. No?
Yeah, which is quite in the cards, sir. Which is quite in the cards. So what exactly, you mentioned the race to Siachen. I mean, it sounds like a Formula One car race trying to get to the same point.
It sounds like a movie, all right. The race to Siachen. And believe me, the events unfolded like a movie. I use the word deliberately. It was a race to occupy Siachen. Now, the Pakistanis had put their plans to occupy Siachen Glacier. It was laid in place much earlier. It was called Operation Ababil. There also had a dedicated force called the Burzil Force, composed of commandos and people of the northern areas, which were used to capture all the major passes and the heights around the glacier. Now, when activity on both sides started heating up, when they decided to occupy the glacier, the heights around Siachen Glacier, sometime in May 1984. Maybe it was summer. Remember, those heights, I mean, a man cannot survive without specialized equipment. And in those days, of course, nobody was as prepared as we are right now. Now, we had awoken to their design sometime around the end of 83. And we decided to preempt them by occupying the height of the Saltoro Ridge on the map which you see out there. The Saltoro Ridge is the ridge line which blocks access into the glacier to Pakistan from the west. The battle is not in Siachen. Everything on the Saltoro Ridge line. Now, we have got information about the forces being prepared and things like this. But the clincher came very much like a movie. The clincher came when we were shopping for Arctic gear to equip our troops who would be going up to the heights. And then we found to our horror that all the suppliers in London and Switzerland said there is not a single piece of Arctic gear available in the world because the Pakistanis have purchased 3,000 sets of it. As General Chibber puts in his memoirs, he says when the news came about, the hackles rose because with 3,000 sets, they were obviously not planning a picnic with it. And that's when they realized that they got planned to occupy something in high altitude, and all indicators indicated towards Siachen. So we put into place our own plan, Operation Meghdoot, in which we would occupy the glacier before May, when they would have come. Which was the date selected? They selected the date of 13th April, Baisakhi. I remember when the conversation, when they were deciding the date, when Brigadier Channa, who was the commander of the task force at that time, when he asked why he said 13th, they said, why do you want to select 13th? It's an unlucky day. He said, yes, it's also Baisakhi. And nobody will expect any activity at that date. And it was decided that we launched the operations to occupy the key heights on this map along the Saltoro Ridge, Siala, Bilafondla, and Yongla at the bottom, along with all the other important heights along the Saltoro Ridge line. The plan was Bilafondla Pass, the major pass and the biggest pass, was to be occupied first by a platoon of 4 Kumaon under Captain Sanjay Kulkarni, who later retired as Lieutenant General, a very famous man. Major Ajay Bahuguna was to take his platoon and go and occupy Siala. And at the same time, Major Sandhu, again for 4 Kumaon, and his company were to move up towards the heights and start occupying the heights. The plan was to occupy the passes first and then the rest of the heights which are coming out there. Now, on 13th, as Captain Sanjay Kulkarni and his platoon landed at Bilafondla, occupied it, a raging storm came about, and there was no further activity permitted for the next 3 days. They also lost a boy through high altitude pulmonary edema, mountain sickness as they call it. And he made one transmission on the radio to inform the base that they have lost a boy out there. This transmission was picked up by the Pakistanis. They sent a helicopter to reconnaissance on top of Bilafondla, detected the Indian presence, and then they started preponing their own occupation. And their forces started moving up towards the height to capture it, or rather to retake it. They launched, again for them also, the passes were the key area. And they launched their first attack on the 23rd of June. I know it's come almost months later. But it takes a lot of time to build up troops and move up in those particular heights. And when that attack came, it was repulsed. Attacks on other Indian positions also repulsed, but then we had built up our forces. We had got artillery, anti-aircraft guns were in position out there. And with all the passes occupied, the heights occupied, we were now in the strong position on the Saltoro Ridge. We had won that race to Siachen, literally by days. Had we been delayed by a few days here and there, had they moved a little bit earlier, the shoe would have been in the other foot now. And that's why I call it a race. And like those who were up, they say, the race was won with days, if not just hours, to spare.
This would have been a Kargil moment at 21,000 feet height and in icy surroundings if he would have got late.
Then these were worse than the Kargil height.
Yeah, of course.
Even in terms of altitude, they were almost 4,000 to 5,000 feet higher. It would have been virtually an impossible task to retake it. Correct. Not because of the lack of effort from the Pakistanis, just the heights are such dominating things. It is very difficult. So, sir, you said that we started on the 13th of April, they started on the 23rd of June. What was happening in the... No, they started sending troops up. The first attack on a position came on 23rd of June. Remember, the ridge line extends almost about 70 odd kilometers, I mean, they were moving up alongside. But these are the key positions, the passes.
So their first attack came on the 23rd of June. I'm sure the middle time of this 1.5 months would have been quite precarious, as you mentioned. Today Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, uh, you know, they lost a boy. They were in a whiteout condition, as you mentioned, blizzard, storm. I'm sure the Pakistanis were also, when the weather opened up, trying to do some reconnaissance, find out what's happening, trying to do their own tactics to kind of scare these guys away. Would you be able to tell us something about the time in the middle where the Indian Army was trying to get set up in that area? How was, were we able to supply them, and how was the time spent by the soldiers there?
See, remember, in those days, we had the most basic of basic high altitude equipment. Even the platoon on the top, they had little pup tents in which they were there. They were being supplied by helicopter as and when the weather permitted. The wind conditions were terrible. The weather conditions were terrible. And the only thing is they were on the height. And like that, you couldn't sleep out there, you couldn't eat out there, nothing. Though people were living in those, occupying those heights in horrible conditions in the initial days. And when the Pakistanis also, when their attacks started being repulsed, the ones on Billafon and Siala, that is when they did the next best thing. They started occupying the heights along the Saltoro ridge line as well. But remember, all the dominating heights were held by us. So they began taking posts, occupying it, adjoining the Indian heights. And that is how I won't call it a race, but the move to start occupying posts on the Saltoro ridge line began. Another one adjoining it, a third one today. Each side has got almost 100 to 150 posts. About a brigade is deployed out there. But it began gradually, one post at a time, one peak at a time. But the interesting thing was, coming to our story of Kaid Post, was in 1987, or rather 1986, is when General Parvez Musharraf, who was the commander of the SSG battalion, of the SSG group out there, he took over and he occupied a series of very, very high posts, including the left shoulder of Billafon La Pass. That, at a height of 22,500 feet, was the highest point on the ridge line. Now, the reason it had not been occupied, can you imagine, sustaining yourself, even surviving at those heights, was a daily challenge. Sometime in the summer of 1986, Pakistani commandos climbed at that peak. It was slightly easier from that side and occupied the left shoulder. They didn't put up a post on the top. It was a little bit below the top. The crest was about 22,500 feet. The post was established about 1,000 feet below the crest of the peak. Now, when they established it, from the top, they could see the entire glacier. They could see Indian posts around them, Ashok, Sonam, Amar, and dominate them. They could see helicopters moving up from the base camp and coming and supply them. Can you imagine the kind of information that was being passed on to them? Now, when they had occupied it, they were actually it's supposed to be a base from which they could use it for all subsequent operations, till we finally awoke to the occupation of that height. And let me tell you one more thing. Yes, the name, when they occupied that post, was so important that they called it Kaid, after none other than Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. That is the importance of the post. And also, besides symbolic value, you must remember the psyche that the Pakistani army was on a complete back foot in Siachen. This occupation was a major success for them. Right? And the army was under political pressure. Benazir Bhutto, when the news of the loss in Siachen was coming about, Benazir Bhutto was telling them, this Pakistani army is only fit to fight its own country. She sent the chief a gift of bangles and a burqa. She said, you all lost the country in 71, now you're losing Siachen to us. So, this symbolically also was I would say tactically and symbolically, it was of huge value to Pakistan.
I mean, it's quite interesting, the series of events that led up Pakistan to get stuck there. And it is also very interesting how they spin the narrative within their own country. They've got a village in their side, by the way, it's known as Siachen.
Yeah.
They call there, they've got a namesake brigade, which they call the Siachen Brigade, because they feel that they are in Siachen and serving there. Interesting.
Anyway, I shall come to that later on, but they are nowhere near Siachen Glacier. But I shall come back to that later on as we go along.
I mean, since you mentioned this whole story of how Pakistanis actually, try and push or twist, it's one of the
narrative. Yes.
greatest examples of Prime Minister sending bangles to an army chief. I don't think it would have ever happened anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So how did now we were in our posts, of course, looking up.
Yes.
Looking up to find out if any Pakistani had come there, trying to save ourselves, some heat to survive there. How do we realize let me just put it very, very frankly, that Musharraf himself was sitting up there?
How do we realize that this Qaid has been established? Okay. They were observing and passing on information. They were dropping artillery, they were controlling artillery fire, everything. We suspected there's something there. Remember, and those heights, Air Force was revealing nothing. They were concealing themselves well enough. But then what happened was, on the 17th of April, 1987, an incident took place at India's Sonam post. Sonam is about 3 kilometers from Bilaf. I'm going to call it Qaid now, from Qaid post. Qaid was about 1,000 feet higher. Most of the time not visible because it was covered by clouds. So they obviously meant they could see you completely. They could see Sonam completely, right? A new battalion had come in, 8th Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, and their troops had come out to take over Sonam post from Fai Bihar, which they were to relieve. Now, as the handing over, taking over was taking place, it was a clear day, as they say. So visibility was very good. Firing took place from Qaid, which killed 2 people. When an helicopter came to try to evacuate them, they fired on the helicopter as well. So the 2 wounded, bled to death in the snow out there. And we realized that there's somebody sitting out there on the left shoulder of Bilafondra Pass. That is when all the information, the news reports, everything the end reports all fell into place. And we became aware that yes, Qaid post is up there and we have to do something now to eliminate it.
So do you think they would have sent some kind of a reconnaissance, or how would have they gone about this whole operation? Because
when we got to know, when we realized that there's some enemy out there, and they always discuss the different options. What do we do with it? Do we attack it physically? You can't attack the thing. Remember, it was about 1,000 feet. You had to climb a 1,500-foot ice wall just to get to that position up there. And then you had to assault frontally in a very narrow ledge against an enemy sitting out there with machine guns. So they say, okay, can we neutralize through artillery fire? Not possible because the weather is so bad. And also, remember, there was a huge paucity of information about the post. Now, they say 8 Jammu and Kashmir, 8 Jackal IFG had come out there, which also entrusted the task of capturing it. They say the first thing you have to do is get information about it. Air Force will reveal nothing. So they said, we will start off with sending a reconnaissance patrol, which will go all the way to the top and find out what is there. And that patrol, there was a very young officer, Second Lieutenant Rajiv Pandey, who had just joined the battalion. He and a team of 10 was sent up from our Sonam post. They had to climb that ice wall, reach all the way to Qaid, and get information about it. Keep on delaying it. This is the route, this is the problem. But we knew nothing about it that time. And simultaneously, he also was told to place a rope, which would lead all the way to top, which would help the assaulting troops in the assault later on. Now, this officer, he is one of the unsung heroes of the army. He was a what a VRC, all right. But his role was amazing. I mean, he climbed up on the 29th of May. He and his patrol, they climbed up that ice wall, they reached the ledge, they crawled right to the edge of the post, radioing back information.
Wow.
In ice, it was a snowstorm, the ice cold condition. It would have been about minus 20 at that night. It was pitch dark. And then, unfortunately, the team was seen by the enemy. That machine gun opened up. Everyone was hit and they fell backwards. Their body fell back against the ice wall and fell down that 1,500 foot ice wall out there. Except for two men who were behind and were not seen, everybody was killed. And unfortunately, when they fell to the ground, at the base, their bodies were covered with snow. And even that rope which they had laid, that was also obliterated by snow. Now, his death was a disaster, was tragic, but it gave us an idea of, we got to know, okay, now this is generally the strength and disposition of the enemy out there. And that got us, set the basis for subsequent plans to capture it.
At least their lives didn't go in vain, and
yes,
we could respect them in their in their sacrifice today. It's a it really finds you to be, I mean, amazed would not be a right word to say actually, sir, but I would say he would be what, 21, 22-year-old guy.
Yes, 22 years old. You're right. He was to, let me tell you a small story of him as well. He was to have celebrated his 22nd birthday the next week. Fresh out of the Indian Military Academy, young, enthusiastic, courageous. But that young officer did what was expected of him and much, much more.
Of course, and doing what he did, I mean, it's not something that anybody could think of, ki bhai, chalo, let's just do this and stuff like that. We heard the stories of Kargil, how people climbed up. Here you can imagine it's even higher and even tougher.
It's worse.
God bless them, sir. That's all one can say. So, sir, now we talked about the first reconnaissance. Of course, there would have been some kind of information that have come. They would have been able to, with their sacrifice, they were able to tell the commanders on the ground, boss, ye cheezein hain. Now, what happened after that? I mean, did they make an attempt? Did they want to send another mission? What happened?
You see now, when they got it, remember, 8 Chakras coming out there, such heavy casualties in the first month of arrival of a new location will shake anybody. Even the commanders up the line will say, okay, let's give the stars to somebody else. But the battalion, they said, we have lost 10 of our boys. We want revenge. We want one more chance to get to capture Kaid. And they launched an operation. They call it Operation Rajiv in name of Lieutenant Rajiv Pandey. And they were when the CEO addressed the men for volunteers, it was to be almost a suicidal task. But every man in the regiment volunteered. Cooks, barbers, washermen, everybody. And finally what they said, okay, the CEO himself said, I will not, remember those conditions, how terrible it would be. It is not like how we have it even in normal soldiering, where you have your companies and squadrons together. Here your men are spread all over the posts. So the team has to be formed by getting hand-picked people, putting somebody in a post from the rear area, and they formed a team led by Major Varinder Singh, Major Viru as he called. He was the team commander. His 2IC Captain Anil Sharma, 3 JCOs, Harbans, Sansar Chand, and Naib Subedar Bana Singh, who became a legion later on, along with 57 other hand-picked people. They were told they were hand-picked for the task of capturing Kaid. And now, the team assembled near Sonam Post. They trained for almost 2 or 3 weeks out there, including zeroing of the weapons, getting idea how to reckoning the ice wall, seeing how you can go up there. Everything done in secrecy, so the Pakistanis would not see them. And they began making their preparations for the attack and capture of Kaid. Secrecy is the key word. Nobody wants to even know the fact that they're planning to attack.
Wonderful.
Because remember, They are defenders. They were about a half a platoon there. Had they got wind of the fact an attack is coming, sending up one more section would have made it impregnable. So see, everything they had to do. Now look at these conditions which I described, and everything they're doing in pitch dark conditions so that they cannot be seen from the top.
Wow. Yeah, in itself, it tells you one, they're adding a difficulty level on themselves by doing whatever they're doing at night, and of course, not to try and conceal whatever, not to reveal their activities to the other side. So, before we get on to the story of actual capture or the attack that the Indian Army led to, capture that particular post, I want you to kind of tell us, when they were training, what kind of situations were they training for? What were the difficulties that they had in front of them? Apart from obviously training in the night and saving your heads from the Pakistani snipers.
Very good question. Very few people think of it also. Now remember, they were acclimatized to operating in these heights. They go through stage of acclimatization. But to move to a height of 22,000 feet, it calls for different levels of fitness and health. When the team assembled, I'm glad you asked me this question. From Sonam Post, they had to move to virtually what they call a knife edge saddle. A small ridge line, they call it almost knife edge. You have to move across it for almost a kilometer and get to the base of an ice wall. That is an ice wall, which is a 1,500-foot ice wall, which you have to climb up to reach Kaid Post. When you reach the top of it, there was overhang. You have to jump cross the overhang, and then assault the post. So the team had to train to move through that little crevice, that razor sharp spur line. It had to train to climb up that height on the ice wall. It had to zero its weapons in those altitudes. The zeroing goes for a 6. And the thing is, though they were zeroing the weapons, it all amounted to nothing, because when they reached the top, they found it is so cold up there that the weapons all froze. The newly zeroed weapons could not use it. 2 men died in that training itself. Wow. One man fell off a cliff. Another man died of high altitude pulmonary edema. Now, that was the condition they're living in. The attempt was to have actually gone on the 30th of June. And with 2 men having died during the training, I'm very happy you asked me this question about the training. In the preparation phase, Major Viru and his team members and his team leaders got together. And they said, sir, our strength, we are weakening by the day just by sheer exposure. And now we are ready. Let's launch now. They preponed the attack and they launched their first attack, and rather they made their first attempt on the 22nd of June.
That's I think a very smart decision on shop floor management. It's called.
Yes, it was. It was. I mean, for a panel, and if you take a you read this story as it unfolds, you find so many decisions were made by the men on the ground, which is the story of the Indian soldier. Yes. In a way, this decision of preponing it, but I must also tell you what happened in the first attempt.
Yeah, please.
When they launched the first attempt on the night, the plan was they would go to the base of the ice wall, find the rope that Rajiv Pandey had laid, and use it to climb. Also remember, besides the help, it would give you the direction in which you have to move at. Okay, it was a recce route leading upwards. Now they went to the base of the ice wall, they could find nothing. Everything was covered by snow. So they decided to start climbing on their own. Now, in 8 hours of movement, can you guess how much they had covered? Less than 400 yards.
Whoa.
That was the level of difficulty in which they were moving in. At around 4 in the morning, they were still on that ice wall. And then again, Major Virender made a decision. He said, we have still not reached the top. If I continue climbing, it will become daylight. The enemy will see me. All they do is lob grenades and we are finished. And we can't attack. So let us move back. So at about 4 in the morning, they abandoned the attempt and they came back towards their base. The first attempt failed without them coming anywhere near the post. Now, there is another story that follows. The regiment, the men of the battalion speak of it very highly. The next morning, their CO, Colonel Rai, came to their post, to the assault base. And he really inspired them into attacking again. To the extent he told them that, what are you guys doing out here? You promised me you would meet me only at Khed. Go and capture Khed. I will only meet you there. I won't see you all out here at all. He gave them a huge pep talk, and Major Virender and his party said, okay, sir, we are leaving now. They remember they exhausted after one attempt. They went the same day they started the second attempt. But this time, he sent Bana Singh early to find the rope which was there. And after about 3 hours, they found the rope. And that night, the night of the 23rd, they started climbing the rope and reached the top. Now, with a rope to assist them, the climb was easier. They climbed the ice wall, they reached near the post, and the scout, Tarachand, and the 2 pointsmen, they had climbed a little overhang which led to the post. They climbed that overhang and they were crouching, passing information about what they had seen while the rest of the party was to have moved up. When they were seen by the enemy, again that machine gun opened up. All 3 of them were hit and their bodies hurled backwards. The only saving grace was that the rest of the party, which was still crawling and hiding inside along the ice wall, was not seen. And they did not fire back. They did not alert the Pakistanis of their presence. They stayed their doggo till everything subsided, and then they moved back to the base. The second attempt had also failed. That would have been enough to break anyone.
Absolutely.
And what about the Pakistanis? Now, these guys were upbeat. They had pushed back Indian attacks. They were confident that where they're sitting up there, that we can hold on indefinitely. And they were held. The post was held. Yes,
they've killed a lot of people.
Yes. In fact, as per their record, if you take a look at Pakistani findings, we had lost 10 in the first Recce patrol and 3 in this. They say that we had lost 200 in the attack we launched out there. A lot of exaggeration in their figures, all right. But to give them their due, that Pakistani commander Subedar Ataullah Muhammad and his band of half a platoon of commandos, they did put up a very determined battle right till the very end.
That is there, sir. Of all the stories that one has heard about Pakistan wars, they're tough fighters. They don't, a lot of them will run away. That happens in a lot of the armies in the world. But a lot of stories have come out where they have just stood the ground till the last man, last bullet. And even in spite of the fact that they knew that they had no chance, they've still stood there. That just tells you a lot about, the Pashtun especially, and the poor chaps might be Pashtuns or
stock soldiers on both sides.
Very, very. There's no question about it. They are hard soldiers. Of course, once they become generals, they become soft as cheese because they want to open Papa John's. Coming back to this thing, sir. You've told us about 2. I think very sad attempts more than anything else. It's sad in the loss of life, sad in the effort that has been lost in spite of an inspiring talk with a commanding officer, in spite of, the right people with the right talent, with the right, everything being there, they've not been able to do it. And this is something obviously is going to be a crink in anybody's eye. The third one also failed. They came back one night later, on the night of 24th, 25th, they launched their third attack. That same exhausted team, they climbed up that wall again for the third time. There was a huge blizzard blowing outside. And like I told you, the Pakistanis had got confidence.
nobody can climb up in these kind of weather conditions. The leading team under Subedar Sansar Chand, they reached that ledge. They were in position for the assault. They were all set, but remember the other team had to come up there. It's got to be coordinated. He tried to radio to Major Virinder, who was just 20 yards behind him and couldn't be seen. It was pitch dark and a howling snowstorm was going out there. The batteries of the radio set had frozen solid. No communication was possible. Nothing was, no call possible. The team waited out there till daylight, and then finally they had to withdraw and come back because they could not launch an attack because of absence of communication. Their third attack failed in this morning and in this manner. And then Major Virinder made a huge decision. Again, you're telling me about how the man on the ground, the kind of decision we make to shape it. He said, instead of coming back across the ice wall and coming back to the assault base, which was almost 3 kilometers away, they would stay put on the ice wall itself, hiding out there in the crags, in the crevices. They would not go back to the base. They would remain there itself. And they took shelter in those crags and the crevices in whatever folds of ground they could, and they stayed, being very careful not to be heard and seen by the Pakistanis. Now, you are at that altitude. The wind is blowing at speed of up to 60 kilometers per hour, if not more. They can blow a man off. Along the wind chill factor, the temperature was minus 20. People were going, they were falling from hypo. Almost 1 in 3 were getting affected by that. They started suffering from hallucinations because they called lack of oxygen, starvation. They were licking icicles just to quench the thirst. They were eating there was no hot food, nothing available. They would have attacked that night. And Major Virinder conferred with his commanders again. And they said, Saab, if we are in such a bad, precarious situation out here, we may not even last out the whole day. Let's attack by day itself. In any case, it was pitch dark outside. So they decided to launch the attack at noon. And at noon, they went for their 4th attempt. It was literally beyond, it was the last reserve of energy they had got. And as per the plan, again, they went in prongs. Bana Singh went from the extreme left. Viru and his party, along with Sansar Chand, they went from the right in the same direction as before. And they said we shall launch, the main attack will be launched by Major Virinder, Subedar Sansar Chand and their teams. And Bana and his team would be launching a supporting attack from the left.
Okay.
Bana had gone to a much wider and circuitous route. He had got 5 men with him. 2 of them collapsed due to hypo. He had 3 people left. But he reached the top. So did Viru's party. And as they reached the top, he was detected by the enemy. They brought on fire on him. Viru himself was injured. So they could stay put. They were bringing a fire, but now up to Bana Singh to make it. He radioed to Bana to launch his main attack. 2 men were sent to him as reinforcements. These 5 men launched the attack on the post. But as Bana Singh had spoken to him, he himself said, he said the Pakistanis themselves had also gone through a lot of hardship. They had been through a lot of shelling. They had been through, they were being pounded as well through artillery fire. They themselves were considerably weakened. And they themselves were running low on ammunition and supplies. But notwithstanding that, they were at a huge advantage. They were the defenders in the height.
Yeah.
And Bana Singh closed in towards that machine gun pit first, to try to silence that first. They closed in first, they cocked the weapons, and they discovered to their horror that the weapons have all frozen solid.
Yikes.
None of the weapons were fired. So they closed in, lobbed grenades, killed the crew with bayonets. The Pakistanis who came to counter them were killed again in hand-to-hand fighting and with bayonets and knives. And then they went to that one single, it was a kind of a shelter bunker which they had created in which the Pakistanis were hiding. It was their main shelter. And there they crawled from the rear so they would not be seen, went to the door behind that shelter, opened that metal door behind it and lobbed grenades inside. The Pakistanis were killed on the post. Those who counted them were killed as well through hand-to-hand fighting. Others chose to jump off that cliff rather than come in the hands of the Indians. And the post came into Indian hands. But the story did not end there, because though the Pakistanis were killed and the Indian survivors were there on the post, the radio operator had managed to send a message to their base saying that the post is under attack and the Indians have reached here. And the minute they got to know the post is captured, the Pakis brought on intense artillery fire on their own post. That fire caused 2 casualties. It also prevented any reinforcements from coming in, also prevented any helicopters from coming in. And remember this is, I'm talking at daytime of 26th June. This is all the post-lunch actions. And Bana Singh himself, like he said, that though the post, he says, we were so tired, forget giving dancing a bhangra and all as made in movie. None of us could even give a shout of cheer. The only thing we did was we made that radio message to the base saying we captured it. So then the same Pakistani machine gun that caused so much havoc amongst the Indians was turned in the direction of the Pakistani posts. And they fired the Pakistani posts. And then, like they said, they cooked rice and milk powder from the Pakistani ration on the post. The Pakistani had a stove beneath the machine gun they used to keep it warm so it would fire at all times. They cooked the rice and milk powder on that same stove and had the first hot meal they had in 3 days. Throughout the night, the artillery bombardment kept on pounding the posts. Remember, the Pakistanis could not counterattack as well, because they too would have to climb it. I mean, the climb was not so steep from their side, but they too would have to make a huge climb to reach on the top. They would have to lay ladders, build up a force to counterattack it. So they pounded artillery fire, but no counterattack came. Their counterattacks on this post to recapture this area came months later, when almost a 2-battalion force was built up to first capture the Indian post adjoining Kaid and then recapture Kaid after that. But by then, of course, we had consolidated. We were in a much better position. We had got a stronger strength out there, and the attacks were beaten back with very heavy casualties.
I mean, this is a story of it's nothing but plain and simple grit, nothing else, and determination. Yaar, ab yahan par phas gaye hain. We're not going back without getting what we've come out to do. That's it. So the third attempt, which led into the fourth attempt, which led into the capture of the entire post, and so on and so forth. So I'd like you to now tell us, our forces are sitting up there. We are trying to, of course, the first few days you said, it's pretty tough, a lot of artillery fire from the Pakistanis. Things would have calmed down sometime. We would have got some reinforcement up. What exactly happened when the folks down there realized that this operation has been done, and how did the series of events fold out after that?
Okay. Well, as the artillery fire, they given the success signal, and of course they were euphoria. It was a huge capture, and the capture was sanctioned all the way from the PM's office. It was such an important operation, right? But nobody could reach there because of the weather and this. The next morning, of course, reinforcements were sent from our own Sonam posts. Supplies were sent to build it up, as is the norm. But the first person to have, there's an interesting story I must share with you, because it also tells you how the name of the post changed. The first person to have arrived on the post after its capture, besides Bana Singh and his party, was Brigadier Nugyal, the brigade commander, who next morning, there was a brief lull between the artillery fire, he landed a helicopter in the post, jumped out. And like all senior command, came immediately re-coordinated defenses so that it would be strengthened to face the Pakistani in case of a counterattack came. And then turned around to Bana Singh and says, Bana, where we are standing on right now at 21,153 feet is the highest spot on earth which has ever seen combat. and is also the highest spot on earth where combat will ever be fought.
Hmm.
And for your role in it, this post will from now on be called as Bana Post. And that is how Kaid Post has become Bana Post. That is the story of the change of name as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a bad time when it's tough when this and that, and there comes a good time when the obviously the commanders and everybody came, congratulated everybody, and this and that. But sir, having said all that, knowing the Pakistanis, they're not just going to run away from this area. They wanted to take it back. We can't just change the name and say, "Yaar, ab ye to hamara ho gaya."
Yes, yes,
What happened in the
yes.
counter attacks?
Okay, good. Very good question. Like I said, they were expecting a counterattack that same night. But it couldn't come because of the difficulties, even of even sending, sending supplies, sending a box of Russians is such a task. You can't launch, you require at least a company force on a minimum to have counterattacked that particular post. So, and now, when the loss of Kaid, remember, it was the linchpin of the defenses. There was also a lot of pressure to recapture it. So they launched an Operation Kedat, as they called it, in which two of the crack commando battalions, Parvez Musharraf himself was coordinating that, launched an attack to recapture Kaid Post. Now remember, in mountains also, it is not you go straight to the post. You see, the post was ringed by Indian posts, Ashok, Amar, Sonam. So the direction which they had to come in, they had to first capture the Indian post of Ashok, Amar, and then go on to capture Kaid. Right. In September, these two battalions launched a series of very courageous but almost suicidal attacks over a period of 3 nights.
Wow.
Which were held back again by the same 8 Jackalad. There was another JCO, Naib Subadar Lekraj and his team on Ashok Post, who fought back the attacks over 3 days and 3 nights.
My God.
Indian artillery was in place. Remember that. It was the artillery and firepower which shaped it. And they inflicted very heavy casualty on the advancing commandos, who couldn't. Assaulting uphill is such an impossibility, especially when you're assaulting in, as they were saying, they were assaulting in very steep stone. And those casualties were repulsed. The Indians say they caused almost 87 casualties. The Pakistanis put the figure at about 20. But whatever it be, these counterattacks were repelled. It didn't stop them. They launched further counterattacks right up till 1989 and again in 91 and 93. But Kaid and all the other positions remained firmly in Indian hands.
That's, I think, the crux of the matter, if I may put it that way. Sir, you mentioned General Musharraf.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I think that this particular incident burnt a lot for him. It burnt him up from the inside because he's always commando. He's always got that thing. I mean, there are commandos all over the world, including India, but you don't have a officer or a man going, "I'm a commando." He's like that. He will announce the fact that he's a commando with that kind of pride that a person has. He would have taken it quite personally with regards to what happened in Siachen. We were talking offline when you said that he's kept his grudge for a long time, and he still keeps it.
Yeah.
He's mentioned it in his book as well. I'd like to ask you, what was his active role? Of course, he was pretty senior by that time. What was his active role in this entire game?
See, Parvez Musharraf was involved in Siachen right from the beginning. Even he was his battalion, 3 SSG, was the battalion which had launched the first attack in 1984. Right? He was not part of the attacking force, but it was his battalion. He was involved in it. He was the commander of the SSG forces there in Siachen. He was the one who masterminded the offensive which they launched on 86, 87 to take over a series of very important posts, including Kaid. Right? They were commanders occupying those posts. Now, when Kaid was lost, The counterattack was orchestrated by him. The almost used Operation Kedat was his brainchild. And when that also failed with such heavy casualties, in a way, it was a huge blow to his military prestige, his everything. He didn't forget that defeat of Siachen.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at it, he carried it all the way to when he became his career survived, all right. He became a chief. But if you take a look at it, when he became a chief in 1999, he launched the Kargil operations at a time when our prime ministers were talking peace. And he launched the Kargil operation with one aim. The aim was to cut off the national highway leading from Kargil leading to Siachen, block the supply routes to Siachen, and force the Indians to vacate. So obviously, the defeats he had suffered in Siachen had rankled him for a long time thereafter. You read his book, In the Line of Fire, in which he mentions Siachen. And he also unwittingly gives away the Pakistani hands when he says the Indians caught us by surprise in 1984 when they preempted us. He used the word preempted. Preempted us to Siachen. Meaning they were planning an operation to get into Siachen, but we beat them to him by a whisker.
Yeah.
So he was one of the key characters on their side in Siachen, and he carried that defeat with him for many years thereafter.
Still does, sir. Still does.
He still
Oh yeah. His last interview was, I think, last year, where he was again, हमने Kargil किया था and all that, you know. That he, at the end of it, for him, Kargil, the way he looks at it, I think he looks at it at the factor that I went and captured Indian territory without them realizing it, and he cuts out the part like a good editor of when he got thrown back out. What he looks at is what he wants to look at. Yeah, मैंने तो पकड़ लिया था सब कुछ. So that's what he keeps saying. So I guess he's carried this grudge and he's going to keep it with him for a long, long time to come, sir. So Siachen has been, it's a mystery altogether. Siachen means roses, for that matter. It's a very funny thing. You know, the guns have been silent there for a long time now. We still call it a, fortunately, yes. We still call it an active military operations for whatever reasons. I mean, I'm sure the army has its own this thing. I'm not here to question that. But of course, we heard some time back where, and I'm not going to hint towards politics or anything like that, there was one of the governments who had tried to kind of have a deal. Whatever the deal they wanted to have was a totally different discussion altogether. I'm sure when I say leaving that place or whatever it is, it's not going to be a very palatable this thing. But do you think it's time now we draw down the war to, I don't know, to some point where it can now be called a regular place?
No. See, you look at it this way. Since 2003, there's been a ceasefire in Siachen. And fortunately so. The guns are silent, but we all know weather takes a huge toll. We lost 10 people at Sonam Post. The Pakistani lost 123 at Gyari Post in an avalanche that was 4 years ago. So the weather and living conditions are atrocious. We are spending both sides are spending a huge amount. But the proposed, yes, we all would want to have conditions of normalcy and peace.
Yes.
But depends on what do you mean by normalcy and peace? There's no fighting. Very nice. The Pakistani proposal was we shall withdraw back from Siachen. But the thing is, what withdrawal are they talking back about? Look at this map. The Pakistanis are nowhere near Siachen. They are on the west of the Saltoro Ridge line. They are not anywhere near the Siachen Glacier. So what mutual withdrawal are they talking about?
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's not a mutual, it's going to be our withdrawal. Because they are nowhere. The other thing is, what are the guarantees and safeguards they are providing us?
Absolutely.
To let us know that once we do vacate this desolate Iceland, they would not occupy thereafter.
Absolutely.
Unless these kind of ironclad guarantees are in place, I do not think we should give away the position we hold right now.
Absolutely, sir. And I'm glad you say it like that, because one thing that comes out is the training in Siachen has really helped us dealing with the Chinese on the other side.
Yes,
If nothing else, it's a hard frontier for our soldiers to get trained in.
it is, as you call it is part of the process to make the Indian Army a very strong and battle-hardened army.
Yes.
Yes, a high price, all right. And if you take a look at it, for many people have also compared it not to two blind men, to two bald men fighting over a comb, etc., etc., etc. All right. But the ground realities are this. This is our area. It may be desolate, all right. But till we have guarantees, till everything is placed to ensure that they have accepted our claim line that the border runs north from NJ 9842, as is our perception. Yes, along the watershed. That is when we can say, okay, now this area becomes, let us say, an area where there is no further dispute. Let me put it in this particular manner.
But we can still manage the way we want to.
We can manage the way, of course, it is our area.
Absolutely.
Everything east of Saltoro, where they are at the moment, the actual ground position line, as you call it right now. That's the line, but it's not that becomes a way is now already the de facto LOC.
Correct.
But except that perhaps it's the international border then.
But sir, I've also read reports about the fact that even after 2004, Pakistanis have tried to overfly that place. Is that something that one reads in the media with a lot of mirch masala?
Helicopter flying and all these actually are part of global level actions will keep on continuing. But yes, that active firing is no longer there. That is, it is there that those situations of everyday artillery duels, everyday sniping at each other is now fortunately not there. The enemy remains the weather.
Of course, the biggest one.
Yes.
The story of Bana Singh, sir, what would you like to say about that? That's my last question to you.
Well, if you take a look at it, Bana Singh was a man who led the last assault, the fateful assault. But I have had the honor and the privilege of speaking to him. When you speak to him and ask him, he's the PVC, India's first living Paramveer Chakra. And the first one to have got it, this was a war operation.
Yeah, peacetime.
Yeah. You ask me, साहब जो हमें बताया करने था, हमें बताया था, हमारे सीनियर ने जो बताया था, हमने कर लिया. He is such a simple, unassuming man who feels he only did what he had to do. And like he says, I mean, he was in the position to be in that last assault. He did a marvelous job. But others, Major Virender, who got a VRC for that operation, Sansar Chand, Harbans, Chunni Lal, who was part of the party, who went on to become India's most decorated soldier. Chunni Lal was the soldier with him as a Sepoy who did that last assault. He won Ashoka Chakra subsequently, a Sena Medal subsequently, along with the VRC he got here. But what I'm telling you, all of them are the typical Indian soldier. Simple, straightforward, do their role and do it well. You must speak to him sometime. To understand when he speaks, there is no, when he talks about equipment, your rifles do not fire in the snow. The first thing, your radio says do not function in the snow. We didn't have this kind of equipment. But there's no complaint if you were given equipment which did not function at those heights and things like that. No. पप्स ने दिए साहब बहुत अच्छे पप्टन दिए थे ये बड़ा अच्छा था हमें बताया था करने के लिए हमने कर लिया. And today he is a simple farmer in RS Pura, leading a happy retired life and a national hero, and a very, very worthy and a respected national hero. We can only take our hats off and salute him. That's all we can do to him.
That also is very small.
Everybody else in that team.
That also is very small for us. I mean, what these guys have done, it goes beyond expectations. It goes beyond reality sometimes. Especially the Paramveer Chakra stories are something that you just look back and say, "My God." I mean, what was he thinking at that time? And it's a wonder. One actually, when one reads a story about, let's say, Subedar Bana Singh or Yogendra Yadav,
Yeah.
so many guys, and you wonder. And these are people that are alive after their Paramveer Chakra, incident.
Yeah.
That takes it to a whole nother level, because here is a person who's, I don't know how to term it, but actually went to the jaws of death. Said, wait.
Yes.
I'll go back and I'll see you later. And he came back.
Yes.
And it's a. And here are people who will tell their own tales as if, okay.
Yeah. They only speak, we did what we were told to do. We did what was our duty. There's no glorification, no nothing. And that is, I think, like I said, he was a man on the spot at that point. But that is the story of every Indian soldier.
Yeah, it's the humility of every Indian soldier. I think I can just put it like that. And we see this every day.
Yeah.
To the guys that are standing in Galwan or Depsang or wherever, it's the story still continues. So it's not that the old Indian soldiers are good, today's soldiers not good and stuff like that. Every generation likes to think that hamare time pe achhe the, but the story in the Indian Army has continued. And I think I'd like to, in my own simple way, pay my gratitude to an organization who has produced such heroes. So it's been a roller coaster ride, going up 21,900 feet, coming back down, going up, coming back down, going up, coming back down, and staying up there for one night with you. Through this whole story of the Battle of Siachen and the Battle of Banatop, which I think all must know and remember. Thank you so much for doing the research, for bringing out hidden stories that I think a lot of us won't have even known. It's a pleasure, as always, talking to you, and we will catch up for another subject, another operation.
I think we can catch up on the follow-up to Siachen, which is logically Kargil.
Kargil.
Yes.
We can find out what was going on through Musharraf's head.
Through Musharraf's mind when he planned it.
Let's try and get him for an interview, so I think that'll be interesting. Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you, and I'm once again look forward to many more of these.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jai Hind.